Hey guys, Dantix here. After putting in hundreds of hours into the Outer Worlds 2, I can confidently say this is up there with Fallout New Vegas for my favorite Obsidian title. The way it rewards different choices with outcomes is immersive and encourages replayability so immensely that no sooner had I finished a run did I restart to try out new builds. So what have I learned? Well, how you build your characters is incredibly important, more so than many other games because there is no respecking in this game. Bar save scrubbing, choices are final and you have to live with them, which is half the fun. As you can see, your choices play out for better or worse. So this video is here to make sure you have the most information when it comes to backgrounds, traits, negative traits, skills, perks, flaws, and builds. This will give you the information you need so you can make an informed decision and is absolutely not going to spoil the game for you. I'm here to make sure you maximize what is fun for you. There's a lot to go through, so you can follow the timestamps below and let's begin. The first choice you'll make is your appearance. Now, though it isn't quite as in-depth as something like in Zoe, you still have a few options here that will mostly matter if you're planning on playing in third person. The most important being your body type, male or female. It doesn't come up much in the game because you're referred to in a very Mass Effect way as Commander. As a silent protagonist, you're able to project yourself into the character and you'll only hear a voice when you grunt. Else there's very few instances where your looks will come up outside of menus. So come back after you've made some choices, as your background might influence how you want your character to look. Once it's locked in, it's locked in. Speaking of, let's get into the meat. Background. Now, this is a choice that once selected, it's with you the entire game. Your background is what you were before you became an Earth Directorate agent. You have 6 choices: an ex-convict, a gambler, a lawbringer, a professor, a renegade, or a roustabout. These will mostly come up in dialogue, where you can select a response based on your background. Most of the time getting a different response from the NPC you're talking to, but sometimes passing a check, letting you get a little more from them. Also, very rarely, your background will let you interact with the world. For example, an ex-convict might find a lock they can pry open with an earring, letting you open something you otherwise couldn't. So does it pay to count every single interaction possible in the game and then choose which background comes up more? No, this is just a bit of flavor to aid in your role playing. Though it does come up, it doesn't affect things as much as traits and skills, so make your choice based on your gut and don't give backgrounds much thought. I will, however, suggest that ex-convict and renegade lean more into dangerous individuals, so if you plan on playing a saint, you may never select the options presented by these backgrounds, but you could have guessed that yourself. Now, the traits. These are very important. You get to select one positive trait for your character here. However, you have the option of selecting another, but if you do, you have to take on board a negative trait as well. Like your background, once selected, they cannot be changed. You can't opt out beyond a final confirmation after the tutorial, similar to the Fallout series. Let's start with the positive traits. Brawny. This lets you knock down hostiles while sliding or sprinting into them. Useful since it stops them attacking, but it doesn't work on boss enemies unless you get their health low. It does come up rarely in conversation, but what you really want Brawny for is how often it comes up in the world. Very often, you'll find broken things or jammed doors, and if you have Brawny, you can simply open them with your brute strength. There is no strength skill in the Outer Worlds 2, so if you want to play a big dude who can just bust his way into things, this is a good trait. Keep in mind that jammed doors can often be opened by having high engineering, so if you plan on investing into that skill, my advice is that it clashes with Brawny, so don't pick up both unless it's for role-playing purposes. Brilliant is next, and it's the most tempting trait at a surface level. It makes it so during skill selection, the next choice you'll need to make for your character, you get to specialize in 3 rather than 2 skills. To quickly summarize, by specializing in the skill, you start with 2 points invested into it. Also, you can raise this skill level 2 points past your current level. So if you're level 5, you can get specialized skills to level 7, whereas the non-specialized skills you can invest into can only get to level 5 if you're level 5. So this sounds broken, right? Get 2 extra skill points into something and an extra skill to invest into. Only it's not quite how it works in practice. The max skill level is always 20 regardless of specializations, and you get 2 skill points to invest per level up. So at most, you can only get 1 skill 2 points above your level. but usually you'll be investing equally into 2 skills or spreading them out, in which case the bonus specialization was purely cosmetic. As a positive though, 2 points into something at a base is usually enough early and mid-game to get some benefits. For example, even 3 planets in, I could use a base 2 skill point speech check to pass some conversational checks. So Brilliant is great if you want those extra 2 skill points, which is like you're 1 level above what you actually are. Brilliant also pays off in the world like all traits do, but it appears far less than Brawny. Heroic is next, and it makes it so your companion ability recharge time is reduced by 20%. Companions are quite strong in this game, and if you invest into them, they can carry you through combat all the way through endgame. Their abilities can be invested into a multitude of ways. Heroic is a natural addition to that, and it does come up in the world, but not as often as some other traits. And you can be heroic without selecting this trait if you hit that subscribe button. You can even like or drop a comment. They all help out the channel and your time will be appreciated. Also, your companion abilities will charge 20% faster too. You should try it out. Maybe on your wife or your husband. Go on, give it a shot. Innovative is next, and is one I picked on my first playthrough and didn't regret. It makes it so crafting recipes for ammo, throwables, and resources create up to twice as many of those items for the same amount of crafting materials. So if you're investing into medical or explosives, this is invaluable. You'll be crafting inhaler charges or grenades incredibly often, as they will supplement your build. Even investing heavily into guns matters here, as crafting ammo is a lot easier than buying it. And ammo is quite rare, while crafting materials are not. This trait also comes up in the world, often bypassing the need to have a high amount of skill in other areas. Speaking of though, Lucky is next and applies a 5% critical chance to your damage, which is not a game-changing effect. It's probably the least valuable out of most of the positive traits. However, the biggest draw of Lucky is that sometimes in the world you can rely on luck rather than a skill or having the right items. You can get an option to mash a keypad, for example, and get the right outcome. I find that these outcomes for the Lucky trait usually range from mildly impactful to getting the best outcome for that situation. That sounds very appealing, but Lucky isn't needed in those cases. It just makes it easier or possible if you don't have the requirements. Lucky doesn't come up often, but out of all the traits, it does seem to be the most focused on worldly impact. Nimble is next, and it increases your crouch speed and combat sprint speed by 25%. This is a large amount and very noticeable in practice, so if you plan on meleeing and or being a stealthy character, this is a great trait. To compensate how powerful it is at a base, it very rarely comes up in the world. I saw it only a handful of times. Resilient is next, and it makes it so death is prevented for 3 seconds the first time you would have died in combat. It basically gives you 3 seconds to get safe and heal. Naturally very powerful at higher difficulties, but at lower ones or normal, not really worth the opportunity cost unless you're not the best in combat situations. Resilient, like Nimble, almost never comes up in the world as a choice. Suave is next, and it makes it so you get a 10% discount at all vendors, and your bounty must be 2 times higher than normal to be seen as an outlaw. I'll just say it, unless you plan on being a terrible criminal, one that gets caught often, this won't pay off as much as the other traits. It comes up sometimes in conversation, so if you really want to lean into being a charming character, this could be a trait for you, though having high speech does similar things. Witty is next, and it makes it so reputation with any faction can never decrease below neutral, preventing those penalties from ever hitting you. Now, if you play normally, you won't drop below neutral with anyone, so yet again, this is good if you plan on being a criminal. Though some choices you may make can get one faction to drop in reputation. If you've been helping out at all though, you'll be fine. One of the perks, Psychopath, makes it so you deal more damage the lower your reputation is. So that is counter synergy to this. You need Psychopath to get the serial killer trait too, which is, in my opinion, needed for every kill everyone run. This is one warning I have for you if you plan on killing as many people as you see. You need to lean into developing negative reputation or don't. Both don't work well together. Now, Witty also comes up in conversation, so if you want to max the options available to you, Suave and Witty together plus high speech is an option. but a little overkill. I would say speech on its own is enough for most playthroughs, so in that way, Suave or Witty is good for role-playing without a high speech skill, because some situations you'll just want to be able to talk yourself out of, but you might not want speech to be a focus of your character. For example, you might want to be a James Bond character with sneak and lockpicking and guns. So those are the positive traits. You need to select one or two if you are willing to take a negative one. There are 3 negative traits to select, and I'm here to tell you that they're not as bad as you might think. In fact, for your first playthrough, I actually recommend selecting a negative trait. You get the benefit of 2 traits, which both come up in the world as options, as well as the bonuses that you get from the negative trait, which can come up in the world as something you can select as well. Yes, negative traits can have positive outcomes. Some even combo with positive traits. So for your first run, seeing all these situations come up is fun and exciting and gives you the maximum amount of choice. First though is Abrasive, and it makes it so reputation with any faction can never increase above neutral, preventing bonuses with that faction. Yes, you can get this and Witty, and it does come up in game if you have both, and yes, that means you always stay neutral no matter what. I don't recommend picking Abrasive for your first playthrough, as it actually does limit you quite a bit. It's good for a criminal path, but I know most of you won't be doing that to start with. Next is Dumb, and it makes it so during skill selection, you have to lock 5 of the available skills, meaning you can never put points into them. Let me reiterate, you get 2 skill points a level up. Each skill has a maximum of 20, and you can have a max character level of 30. So do the math, and you can only max out 3 skills. Dumb actually does not affect you much at all, unless you're playing some kind of weird build where you put a point into every skill. And I don't want to crap on your fun, but that's just not going to be good at all. So with an exception of that build, Dumb doesn't hurt you at all. Yet it provides a lot of opportunities for Dumb style dialogue, which you're not actually locked into using. If you select Dumb, you don't need to select the Dumb options that come up. Also, in rare situations, you can use Dumb to bypass things like using a can of sausage for a makeshift fuse. In this particular case here, you can use all the Dumb responses to get into a place you wouldn't otherwise. So you can see why I recommend picking a negative up. The last one is Sickly, and it's the negative I chose for my first run. It gives you 15% less base health and less total toxicity crash threshold. This is just how much you can use your inhaler before you crash and you can't use it again for a while. It sounds bad, but on normal difficulty, this wasn't noticeable. Also, there are a lot of builds that require you to be in the crashed state. It also, like Dumb, gives you opportunities in conversation and in the world. Not really much of a drawback considering how powerful an extra trait is. Now we move on to your skills. These are what you'll be leveling up as you progress through the game and will more or less define your character and its playstyle. Higher skills give bonuses passively while unlocking things you can do in the world and unlocking perks you can purchase every other level up. Also, many pieces of strong gear and weapons have some kind of skill related scaling, getting a stronger effect the higher a particular skill is. So let's take a look at your choices. Engineering is first, and it determines your ability to fix and repair things in the world. I mentioned jammed doors, and these will be the most common, as well as other mechanical objects. It also gives you 1% damage resistance per point, so it will make you tankier. Now, the reason you'd pick engineering becomes more clear when you take a look at the perks it unlocks. The first perk is Scrapper. It requires 1 point in engineering, and it makes it so auto mechanicals always drop some additional crafting materials, and this really adds up over time, letting you create more ammo, more grenades, more mods, etc. Then we have Tinkerer for 5 in engineering. Your modded weapons now deal bonus damage, increasing with your engineering skill. 10% damage with modded weapons, increasing by 2.5% per engineering skill point, and you can get engineering up to 20. Putting mods in weapons is extremely easy, so this actually makes it so engineering can put out significant damage. For just 5 in engineering, it's really good. Next is Makeshift Armor for 3 points in engineering. Whenever you craft items, your armor gets a temporary bonus to its armor value that degrades from incoming attacks. The amount of armor added is based off the total value of the material used. The bonus armor can take more hits before degrading, as your engineering skill increases. So it's 1 armor value to your equipped armor for every 25 bits crafted. And to give you an idea, your kind of endgame armor sits around a value of 10. So this can actually make you extremely tanky if you do a lot of crafting, and you can do a lot of crafting, especially with one of your companions who lets you craft anywhere out in the world. So this can be quite useful, and I find myself never really dying when I am an engineer. Last is Master Armorer. This is the big payoff for 20 points in engineering, and it requires your makeshift armorer as well. It makes it so your body armor gains an additional armor mod slot, allowing you to add a second mod to your armor, and usually modifying your armor with a second piece means just adding more armor to it or more resistance to it. So it's not as flashy as you might think, but it does make you extremely tanky alongside makeshift armorer. As an engineer, you're going to be very tanky, and you're going to be finding a lot of things to help you craft. Best of all though, with just a single perk, the Tinkerer perk that only requires 5 in engineering, you do quite a significant more damage. So if you're not planning on investing fully into engineering, I would understand if you get only 5 points just so you can get this. Explosives is next, and in the world, it often gives you ways to breach particular doors with explosives, as well as disable mines and other traps which are abundant. Passively, it increases your explosive damage by 10% and explosive damage resistance by 1% per level, so 200% explosive damage and 20% explosive resistance at level 20. Explosives are grenades and mines, and as well as any weapon that has been modified to fire explosive rounds, which most can be. So yes, it's entirely viable to play an explosive focus like I did on my first playthrough, as grenades are extremely powerful and explosive weapons are abundant with modifying. Let's take a look at the perks. The first perk is Diffuser. Whenever you disable a mine, it's added to your inventory so you can place it yourself, and that requires 3 in explosives. Now, I didn't use this a whole lot just because I found myself able to craft mines and explosives quite easily without needing to do this. So if you don't want to waste a perk point, I would recommend going for Grenader instead. You unlock an additional throwable equipment slot. You also gain a small bonus to explosives damage, and that bonus is 10%, and it only requires 2 in explosives. Then we have Hot Blooded. You now apply burn faster and heal whenever burn deals damage or reaches max stacks. This helps keep you alive, but also puts you in a focus of using plasma-based weapons. So it's 20% more stacks of burn applied when dealing plasma damage, and you heal for 50% of damage dealt by burn and plasma explosions. So you can actually modify weapons to do both plasma damage and to be explosive. And with Hot Blooded, this can be very, very powerful. Best of all, it only requires 1 in explosives, so this is a very good perk. Then we have Pitch Tossball Winger. Directly hitting anyone with a grenade or mine will deal damage and stagger them. Explosives also deal more damage, 20% more explosive damage, and 50 physical damage on a direct hit with a grenade or a mine and a stagger. Now, that 50 physical damage on direct hit is actually quite powerful, especially early and mid game. You'll see it take down a regular enemy to about half their health with the added explosive damage. This just means you'll be throwing grenades at targets instead of kind of around them or in between them, and it's very, very effective. So this is a good perk as well, especially when you consider that it staggers, and staggering an enemy means they won't have enough time to run away from the explosive, which a lot of enemies can do. Next is Secret Recipe. It makes it so your explosions do full damage across their entire blast zone and requires 6 in explosives. This is very, very good. You will notice that some explosions have like a blast fireball, but enemies outside of that fireball will still be taking full damage and still die, which is very, very useful because this drastically increases your explosion DPS. It's very needed. If you're going explosives build, just pick this up. Then we have Incendiary Chef. It unlocks a recipe to craft volatile grenades. Volatile grenades deal significant damage, but holding them for too long can cause them to explode in your hands. On selection, you immediately gain several of these volatile grenades to use, and it requires that you have 8 in explosives. Now, this grenade all the way through the game will be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful grenade you can use. Yes, it does mean that when you take it out and you hold it down so you can see where it's going to land and its blast radius, slowly that blast radius will pull closer and closer towards you until the grenade explodes. This means you have to throw it out fairly quickly to offset just how much damage this does, and it doesn't actually take much to craft it. It's very easy to craft, similar to your other explosives. So this is a very good perk if you plan on using grenades. I especially used a lot of these. I had 40 sitting in my inventory at all times. I'd go into fights and just spam these. They're amazing. So your final perk in explosives is Demolitionist. It requires 20 in explosives and it requires the perk Secret Recipe. It makes it so all of your explosives have a 50% increased area of effect and can no longer deal damage to you, though the hazards left by the explosives are still dangerous. This makes it so if you modify a weapon with explosive damage, you can shoot point blank and not take any damage from it. Later on, there is gear that makes it so you actually get temporary health for dealing explosive damage, so you get effectively immortality for having this and that item. So yes, Demolitionist is a very good payoff for 20 in explosives and I would highly recommend it. Guns is next and is exactly what you'd expect. It increases your effectiveness with all guns, 10% damage and 1% armor penetration per level. This is a quite significant 200% and 20% at level 20, and naturally if you max this out, you'll be extremely dangerous in combat. Out of all the skills though, guns, melee, and sneak come up the least in the world. Rarely you might be able to select a gun related option in conversation, but really they know they're locking you into a combat skill and it would be too powerful if it helped you in other ways. Let's look at the perks. Commando is first, and for either one in melee or one in guns, you unlock an additional equipment slot. You can also get this additional equipment slot for having particular headpiece gear. So it's a question of, do you want 3 or do you want 4 guns at all times? Having 2 is quite stifling, but this does require you invest a perk point into it. And I'm not exactly sure that's going to be what you need for your particular build. Then we have point blank artist for 1 in guns. It makes it so damage with shotguns, SMGs, and pistols is increased against target within 10 meters, but less above that distance. Those weapons also gain increased sneak attack damage, so if you plan on playing up close, 100% extra sneak attack damage is quite a lot, and 30% damage to near enemies is also quite a lot. However, minus 15 damage to far enemies isn't that much of a downside, so this is a very good perk. Next is Sharp Shooter, but it requires 1 in observation as well as 1 in guns. So when we get to the observation part of the perks, I won't mention this. Just keep it in mind if you're going guns and observation together, that Sharpshooter is very good because it makes it so marksman, assault, and sniper rifles deal increased damage at distances over 20 meters, but less below that distance. Sneak attack damage from these weapons is also increased. 100% extra sneak attack damage is quite a lot, so is 30% damage to far enemies, and minus 15 damage to near enemies isn't that big of a trade-off, and you can combine these both, so you get 15% extra damage to far enemies and 15% damage to close enemies when combined together. Yes, it's not 30%, but then you can have that plus 200% sneak attack damage for having them both. I would highly recommend doing it that way. Then we have Crabble Rancher for 2 in guns. It gives you plus 10% ranged damage and plus 20% critical damage with marksman rifles, pistols, and shotguns. But the bonus critical chance is only there if the magazine is half empty. This is just a good perk if you want to output more damage. Then we have Serendipitous Slayer. You gain an innate critical hit chance with pistols and SMGs of 10%. Additionally, critical hits with these weapons automatically reload a small portion of the weapon's magazine with a 1-second cooldown. That's just to stop it going infinite. Once again, this is a good skill because reloading in this game is quite time consuming. Then we have Shiny New Toy, and it's really the only reason I see you pick up Commando because it's and 5 in guns or 5 in melee is required. With it, you gain a bonus to damage for a moderate duration after swapping weapons, and that's a 20% damage increase, which is quite significant. Then we have Trick Shot. It also requires 1 in guns and 1 in observation, and it makes it so weak spot kills ricochet, dealing damage to a second nearby target. So very good at clearing out rooms if you're good at hitting those weak spots. Hint, it's usually the head. Then we have Deep Drums for 3 in guns. It makes it so machine guns and special weapons and assault rifles slowly reload automatically. Additionally, all these weapons have an increased magazine size of 50%. And that's why you want this perk for the 50% increased magazine size, because the slowly reloading automatically isn't that quick. It is good, but it's not that quick. You want it for the magazine size because reloading is quite time consuming in this game, like I mentioned. Then we have Gun Runner for 4 guns. You can now fire while sliding, mantling, and sprinting with assault rifles, shotguns, and SMGs. Additionally, the spread of these weapon types is reduced, and that's just reduced not just when you're sliding, mantling, or sprinting. So it's good if you want to be more accurate, though for 4 in guns, I don't think it's quite as powerful as some of the others that we've seen in this line. Then we have Eden Windage. Marksman rifles, pistols, and sniper rifles have increased range and weak spot damage. So if you plan on using any of those gun types, this is quite powerful. It does require Crabble Rancher, but it's a significant increase in range and weak spot damage. Surprisingly, it doesn't require any in observation, just 3 in guns, though observation is usually the one that likes increasing weak point damage. Then we have Suppressionist. This requires 8 in guns, which is quite a lot, and 8 in sneak. So this is another one that combos with guns. Pistols gain an increased sneak attack damage and are quieter. Guns of any type with silencers make no noise whatsoever. So you get minus 75% firing noise and minus 100% firing noise if you use a silencer, and you get the 100% sneak attack damage for pistols. Now, this is extremely good if you want to be your James Bond type character, as making no noise means you can fire kind of with reckless abandon while you're sneaking, and I don't have to tell you how good that will be, especially when you get those sneak attack damage ratings up really high. We've seen 200% so far, plus this is 300% extra, which puts you up to 1000% extra sneak attack damage at level 20 of sneak. So yes, this is a very good combo. Then we have Hail of Lead. Guns with automatic or burst fire deal increasing damage the more you fire. The bonus resets after swapping weapons or not firing for a few seconds, and has a cap of 100%. So if you use a lot of automatic weapons, this is just a no-brainer. You're going to do a ton more damage. There are a few weapons in this game with large magazine sizes. We've got a way in the perks here with Deep Drums to increase your magazine size. So it shouldn't be too hard with a lot of weapons to get up to that 100%. Then we have Multitasker for 14 in guns and the Commando perk as well. Your holstered weapon reloads automatically when you manually reload your active weapon. Now, if you like switching between all your different weapon types and only switching when you've run out of ammo, this is very, very good because, like I said, reloading takes forever in this game. Penetrating shots requires point blank artist and also requires 6 in guns, but it makes it so your shotguns and SMGs ignore a portion of armor, making them more effective against armored enemies. So that's 50% armor penetration for both, and that is quite significant. And there are a lot of armored enemies, bar your creature enemy types, which don't usually have any armor. Then we have Lucky Strikes. For 20 in guns or 20 in melee, critical hits do significantly more damage. Critical hits that would kill cause the targets to explode and deal damage to nearby hostiles. So this is your kind of bloody mess perk. 100% critical damage and 20% of nearby hostiles' health in damage on killing with a critical hit. This is a no-brainer. If you get to 20 in guns or 20 into melee, you just want to pick this up. It's very, very obvious. Hack is next, and like you'd expect, it comes up quite often in the world. You can hack into terminals and even auto mechanicals. Auto mechanicals are incredibly common in the game as they are one of the 3 enemy types. Most factions use them in some way, so the 5% damage to auto mechanicals per level is powerful. This and Lockpick can come up the most in the world out of any other skill, though they don't always have the biggest impact. Sometimes they let you approach situations without using combat or bypass the need to get extra information to get into another area. But there's also great gear locked behind them as well. So let's take a look at the perks. Manual Reset is first for 1 point in hack. It makes it so you can hack into auto mechanicals, forcing them to restart, which temporarily disables them. You can reset unaware auto mechs by sneaking up to them and having enough hack skill. You also get a bonus to damage against auto mechs, which is 10%. This is just very good because you kind of need it for some of the perks coming up and for some of the gear that you'll get later on in the game. Then we have restricted access for 1 in hack. You can access the restricted inventory of vending machines, and if you're going down hack, there's almost no reason not to get this because you're just going to get better stuff and bonuses for having hack. Now, this isn't always amazing stuff, just from my experience, but when it is, you'll definitely appreciate putting 1 point into this. Then we have bit transfer. Bounty terminals now have an option to immediately cash out bits by hacking into bank accounts. Once an account is drained, you'll need to earn 7,200 experience points to access the accounts again, so you can keep draining money from the bounty terminals. If you're someone that likes spending a lot of money, this can be very useful. There are a lot of things in the game you can spend money on, but usually that means you won't be going down the crafting route if you are going down the hack route. Then we have Auto Mech Jammer. For 5 in hack, you passively jam auto mechanicals, reducing the speed at which they detect you, making it easier to sneak by them. You also gain a small bonus chance to critically hit against auto mechanicals. So you pick this up if you're going a sneaky hacker build, but you also don't need to have sneak to get this because the jamming is actually quite significant. If you plan on sneaking around auto mechs, this is 75% less detection rate, which makes it so they almost never detect you. This is significant, but if you don't plan on sneaking and manually resetting them, then obviously you don't need to pick this up. With Auto Mech Autonomist, your weak spot hits against auto mechanicals cause shock damage to chain to nearby enemies. Auto mechanical weak spots deal 50% of your weapon's damage as shock to nearby enemies. Now, almost every faction uses auto mechanicals in some way. For example, the Protectorate always has Dragoons around, so you'll be shocking all the auto mechanicals and non-auto mechanical enemies with this perk, so I definitely recommend picking it up. Then for 20 in hack, which is your payoff for going so far into hack and having manual reset, you have Plug Puller. Hacked auto mechs are permanently disabled rather than temporarily disabled. Permanently disabled auto mechs reward XP and can be looted, so that means if you sneak up to them and manually reset them, aka hack into them, you kill them outright. You outright kill them and there's nothing they can do. So this is a way to just insta-give auto mechs, and this can be extremely powerful as there are some really powerful mechs in the game and being able to one-shot them is very good. So you might even consider going a sneaky hacking build if you plan on getting the hacking perks. Leadership is next and is core for a build that relies on its companions to deal damage, like a pacifist build, but it gives 8% companion damage and 4% companion health per level, 160 and 80% respectively. That companion health is welcome because later on they will struggle to survive if you rely on them to tank for you. Leadership comes up as an option rarely in the world. What it's here for is the perks. Inspiring Commander is first for 1 in leadership. Kills secured by either you or the party charge each companion's companion ability a small amount. It heals 5% each time your party scores a kill, and the companion abilities are quite powerful, so you would definitely pick this up if you're going a leadership build. Then we have Camaraderie. The party gains significant damage resistance for a short period of time after reviving or being revived by a companion. Additionally, taking damage no longer reduces your progress to reviving a companion, and the main takeaway from this is that taking damage no longer reduces your progress because that functionally makes you kind of immortal. It makes it so if your companion drops, and you can get a lot of companions to taunt for you, if your companion drops, you can revive them without your enemies being able to stop you. And if you have a companion up and revived, you can use your trauma kits to resurrect instantly when you do drop. So as long as you have the trauma kits, all your companions working together can keep each other alive, and a little later on you'll see a perk that makes that even more viable. Then we have Busy Bodies. For 2 in leadership, your companions will gather crafting materials and items for you while you're away from the ship. The amount gathered is based off the experience earned while away, and they actually gather a fair amount. If you like exploring and doing a lot of side content, you're going to come back to a lot of crafting materials, making this quite good. Then we have the Negotiator. Your companion abilities charge faster and you immediately gain positive reputation with all factions. This bonus is given for all factions already met upon selecting this perk and granted immediately when you meet a new one. As long as a faction doesn't already dislike you, you'll become exalted with them, gaining max positive bonuses. Warning, the abrasive trait still prevents you from getting more than neutral reputation. So plus 75 reputation gain with all factions basically means that you are going to be at the highest possible level of reputation with each faction, and that's extremely powerful because you're going to get all of the extra gear, you're going to get all of the discounts, you're going to get some positive choices with these factions. It's really, really powerful, but you do need 9 in speech and 9 in leadership. So it's a significant investment. If you want this, you're going to need to go down both. And having both lets you play that kind of pacifist role. Then we have On Your Feet. It requires camaraderie and 20 in leadership. This is your payoff for leadership. You can revive your companions from a distance, plus 10 meter companion revive range. And I can't tell you how useful this is. 10 meters is quite far. So you can get behind cover, not receive any damage, and still revive your companions, not putting yourself in harm's way. And the fact that you can't be disturbed while you're reviving means you can keep your companions up and fighting for you without you needing to do much at all. This is a good payoff for leadership. Lockpick is next, and like Hack, it comes up extremely often in the world. It also gives a 1% evasion chance per level, and evading works on ranged damage to completely nullify it. Combine this with light armor and those snipers will hate you. Though, let's take a look at the perks. For 1 point in Lockpick, you can pick up the perk Pickpocket. It grants you the ability to pickpocket others, and that can be done by crouching up to an unaware human and having enough lockpick skill. This means that you'll be able to pull out particular keys from enemies' pockets without aggravating them. You can get really powerful gear and so on and so forth. So if you're going down the lockpick track, you definitely want to pick this up. Then we have Bag Check. It makes it so while crouching, you can see the contents of a person's inventory before pickpocketing them. So obviously you need to get that perk first, and you need 4 in lockpicking. You also gain a small bonus to critical chance. It's a 5% critical chance bonus. So if you really don't want that 5% critical chance bonus, this might be a wasted perk for you. I probably don't need to explain why, but seeing what's in the contents doesn't really matter because you either can or can't pickpocket them anyway. So you're not going to have that failure option. You're not going to even attempt it if you don't have enough. Then we have Through the Keyhole. The contents of a lock container can be viewed before lockpicking. So like I just mentioned before, that's not really that useful. However, you also gain an increased range bonus with guns. That's 50% more weapon range. So if you're going a sniper build, you might want to consider getting 2 points into lockpick just so you can pick this up. It is quite powerful. 50% more range is a lot of range. Then we have Sleight of Hands. Pickpocketing is significantly faster, and you gain a bonus to sneak attack damage based on your lockpick skill. So if you want to go a sneaky backstabbing character, getting 8 into lockpicking so you can pick this up could end up making you deal a lot more damage. However, because it scales with lockpicking skill, you get 10% sneak attack damage per skill, which will ultimately be 200% sneak attack damage at level 20 of lockpicking. You might even consider making lockpicking your primary skill. Melee is next, and like guns, this is a combat related skill. 10% damage with melee up to 200% at level 20. Also -2 damage received when blocking with a melee weapon, down to -40%. Now, like I mentioned with guns, melee comes up in the world the least often alongside guns and sneak. You do see it in the situations where you can break into a container holding a melee weapon or lift something particularly heavy off someone, but you aren't picking this for anything beyond the combat benefits. Let's have a look at the perks. First we have Commando. Like I mentioned in the guns portion, for 1 in melee as well, you unlock an additional weapon slot. This is less needed in my opinion for melee. So probably give this one a miss. Unless of course you're going down the shiny new toy avenue, which requires 5 in melee and that perk Commando, which gives 20% damage if you switch between your weapons. For 20 in melee, you get Lucky Strikes. Critical hits do significantly more damage. Critical hits that kill cause the target to explode, dealing damage to nearby hostiles. And like I mentioned in guns as well, if you're putting 20 into it, definitely pick this up. This is Bloody Mess 2.0. Then for 1 in melee, we get Duelist. You gain the ability to perform a perfect block with melee weapons, so timing your blocks against incoming melee attacks will stun the attacker. If you plan on doing a lot of meleeing, then of course pick up Duelist. Unless of course like me your timing is awful, then don't bother. Next is Heavy Handed. It makes it so melee power attacks knock down enemies hit and has a cooldown between activations of 10 seconds. This is very powerful. Knocking down enemies stops them attacking you and makes it very easy for you to finish them off, so definitely pick this up if you're going melee. Then we have Run and Hitter. After sprinting for a short duration, the first melee attack performed gains bonus damage. This damage increase is larger for two-handed melee weapons, so you can pick this up if you're going one-handed melee and going that one-handed melee sneak kind of damage build, because 25% more damage is still quite high, but definitely pick this up if you're going two-handed melee weapons, because 50% more damage is extremely large. Then we have Echoing Blows for 6 in melee. Your melee attacks deal a portion of damage in a cone in front of you. The damage of the cone is increased for two-handed melee weapons. So once again, if you're going two-handed melee weapons, definitely pick this up, but do consider it if you're going for the one-handed melee weapons as well. Then we have Pitch Toss Ball Hacker. You ignore 50% of the target's armor value when attacking with a melee weapon, and melee weapons naturally have high damage per hit, so ignoring damage isn't going to be as effective as it would be if you were using an SMG or a shotgun, which is a lot of little hits, but still a significant increase of damage. Then we have Tit for Tat for 10 in melee. A percentage of outgoing melee damage is returned as health, so you heal for 25% of damage dealt by melee weapons, and I can tell you, if you're going melee, definitely pick this one up. Finally, we have Vital Striker. If you're going a sneaky melee build, this is definitely needed. For 15 in melee and 15 in sneak, your sneak attack damage with light melee weapons is increased. Additionally, in combat, your light melee weapons always deal half of their sneak attack bonus. So if you've gotten your bonus up to what is now most likely 1100% sneak damage, you'll be doing 550% bonus damage at all times with your melee weapon. So even in boss fights, when you've been revealed, you're going to be hitting incredibly hard with this. This is absolutely core on any sneaky melee build. Medical was next, and I was surprised by the sheer number of builds you can make with this. There are a ton of medical perks, as well as tons of legendary gear that supplements it. Medical gives you a higher bar to fill before you crash from toxicity from your inhaler, as well as giving you 5% more damage to creatures per level. Creatures are one of the 3 enemy types. Hacking helps with automechanicals, and medical helps with creatures, which are the alien animals on each world. There are a lot of them. So let's take a look at the numerous perks. First, we have Caustic Researcher. You now apply Vulnerable faster when dealing corrosive damage. Additionally, your critical hit chance against dissolved foes is increased. So if you have no issue using corrosive style weapons, then definitely pick this up because this is quite a significant boost. Also, it helps you in combat when you're going down the medical track and only requires 1 in medical. Next is Connoisseur for 1 in medical. Consumed food and drink heal more. Additionally, drugs add an additional inhaler charge. Now, this is passively useful. It's not really something you'll notice taking effect, but it can be useful if you plan on using an inhaler charge build. Then we have Farm Enthusiast. You unlock an additional primer slot, allowing you to use the effects of multiple primers at once. Additionally, toxicity gained from using the inhaler is decreased. Using the inhaler with multiple primers equipped applies all the effects of both on use, but combines the total toxicity of all primers when used, but you do get that minus 25% of the total toxicity received. So this is most definitely required if you're going a medical build, because you start off with only being able to use 1 primer, and unless you get this perk, you won't get that second one. So getting a second essentially doubles how effective your medical inhaler is per use. Then we have Nature's Friend. You can temporarily tame hostile creatures, having them fight by your side for a moderate duration. You can tame unaware hostile creatures by sneaking up to them and having enough medical skill, so you might want to go sneak and medical if you want to tame creatures. Tame creatures will not follow you, but will fight other enemies nearby. Also, you gain a bonus damage to all creatures, so you do 10% more damage to creatures in total, and they'll fight for you for 10 seconds if you have 4 in medical and pick up this perk. It can be useful if you like taming creatures, and there are a lot of creatures in the game. They're one of the 3 enemy types. Then we have Survivalist for 2 in medical. Creatures always drop raw meat, which can be eaten as food. So with this, you'll passively find yourself able to heal yourself back up to full after a fight without ever running out of food and water. Then we have Xyranium Absorption. You accumulate Xyranium poisoning much slower and can no longer receive light and heavy Xyranium poisoning penalties after accumulating too much. Additionally, if you enter a drug crash from using the medical inhaler, when the crash ends, a portion of your Xyranium poisoning is removed. Maxing out your Xyranium poisoning will kill you. So during the game, I actually found Xyranium really wasn't too much of an issue. It's kind of like Rads is in Fallout, except it's much less common. It kind of appears when you kill mechanical enemies, and it appears in certain areas where you need to use your shield gadget to pass through. So really, I don't think this perk is that good unless you get something specifically gear-wise that lets it be good. Inhaler Overload is next for 5 in medical and with the perk Farm Enthusiast. You gain the ability to take a deeper breath when using the medical inhaler, using an extra inhaler charge, increasing the toxicity cost, but also granting a large amount of bonuses for a moderate duration. You can activate this by holding down the Use Inhaler button while in combat. It gives you plus 20% damage, plus 3 armor rating, plus 10% invasion chance, and plus 50% movement speed. So this is the big payoff. Even though it's not 20 in medical, this is the big payoff for going an inhaler build, because you'll deal significantly more damage, you'll take much less damage, and you'll be moving around super quickly. So you'll want to do all you can to make sure you can inhale overload in every fight. Then we have Crash Recovery for 8 in medical. While crashing, you continuously regenerate a small amount of health, 2% health per second, and that's not capped up to 50%. It goes all the way up to 100% health. So you can heal every time you crash, and it continues to heal during combat and outside of combat as long as you are crashing. So there are builds that focus on keeping you in that crash state. Then we have Hungry Guns for 4 in medical and with the perk Caustic Researcher. It makes it so guns that use biomass as ammo can hold twice as much before you need to feed it. Additionally, you deal more corrosive damage in general, so if you are going corrosive damage, once again, this is an absolute must. Then we have Nature's Best Friend. Tamed creatures are now permanently tamed, rewarding XP, but can't be looted. Tamed creatures once again won't follow you, but will fight nearby enemies. This makes it so you essentially remove them forever from the fight. It's like you've killed them, but it also has the benefit of them fighting your enemies for you as well. The downside is you can't loot them, and they usually have loot that can be used in crafting, so it's not the biggest loss. Finally, for 12 in medical and the perk Crash Recovery, you get Lasting High. You can use your medical inhaler while crashing, but at reduced efficiency, and crashes now last longer, so this obviously combos with Crash Recovery quite effectively to keep you in that crash state and to keep that crash state going, and to keep using your medical inhaler, because it's going to have a lot of bonuses based on your gear, which you'll see as you play the game. Observation is next and makes it so you can see hidden objects in the world based on their difficulty rating compared to your level of this skill. Now, this is one skill you won't even notice you don't have unless you invest into it. However, if you do, randomly secrets will be highlighted that you won't have access to otherwise, like shortcuts, more choices, secret rooms with items, etc. It also gives you 15% weak point damage per level, up to 300%. Weak points being effectively useless unless you invest into this. So let's take a look at the perks. Like mentioned over in guns, you can pick up Sharpshooter for 1 in observation and 1 in guns, which increases your sneak attack damage and damage to far enemies while reducing it to nearby enemies. So if you plan on playing a Sharpshooter, you definitely want to pick this up. And you might also want to pick up Trick Shot as well, which makes it so your weak spot hits ricochet to a second nearby target. As you can tell, observation does work well with guns. However, it's not required that you pick up guns as a skill to get the most out of observation. For 1 in observation, you can get Treasure Hunter, which makes it so searching through containers occasionally reward you with bonus bits or crafting materials. Now, this isn't incredibly powerful, so I would recommend giving this a miss if you have better perks to pick up. Then we have Face Reader. In conversations, options that reduce reputation with a faction are highlighted before choosing them. Additionally, you deal 20% more damage to humans. Now, this is actually quite useful, as you'll see before you make the wrong choice. But that 20% damage to humans is also very effective, as that's a third of the enemy types in the game. Then we have Tracker. It requires observation 3. Hostiles on the minimap are no longer hidden by the shroud, the area outside of the player's field of view, and have their facing shown, so you'll see enemies before you kind of know they're there. This is also a perk not really needed unless you really don't understand what enemies will look like at a distance. You don't have a sniper rifle scope that can scope them out. I really don't recommend getting this at all unless you want the real world implications of having Tracker as a perk. Then we have Keen Observer. You gain 25% weak spot damage when crouched and not moving. It does require the Trick Shot perk, which means you do have to put a point into guns, and does require observation 8. So if you're going down that line, this can be quite powerful. Science is next, and you have to say it like that apparently, it's the law. It gives 7 gadget energy meter and 10% more stacks of side effect damage per level. Gadget energy is, unsurprisingly, the energy your gadgets use. You have the tactical time dilation to put you in bullet time, a gadget to melt bodies, one to see hidden wires and enemies through walls, and one to give you a shield to take damage and pass hazards. A high science means you can use these for longer and more often. Also, the damaging side effects include burning from plasma damage, being electrocuted, or being corroded, so yes, your elemental type weapons will get more powerful. Science also does show up as an option in the world, from finding scribbles in a lab that you can decipher, to being able to find special science type weapons like the Shrink Ray. There are a lot of cool science weapons, and this skill has gotten a lot of love, so let's take a look at the perks. Electrotherapist is first and requires 1 in science. You now apply electrocuted faster when dealing shock damage. Weak automechs become scrambled rather than paralyzed when reaching their max stacks, and scrambled automechs will attack their allies for a duration and will still take damage over time. So this is just very useful, especially if you want to use your shock weapon type a lot, and you probably do if you're going down the science track. Then we have Rapid Recharge for 1 in science as well. After dropping to 10% or less gadget energy, energy recharges faster for a few seconds, 500% for 5 seconds, so you'll be able to use your gadgets probably twice before you need to wait for them to recharge. Very useful, especially with tactical time dilation. Then we have Slow More for 3 in science. While using the tactical time dilation gadget, you gain an increased evasion chance of 25%. Additionally, anytime you evade an attack, you restore a small amount of gadget energy. This can occur regardless of whether tactical time dilation is active or not. So you'll want to go light armor, which has a natural amount of evasion on it. You also probably want to invest in skills that give evasion chance, aka lock picking, if you really want to lean into this, as you will get more energy for dodging, and then you'll be able to use your time dilation more, and it's just a cycle that continues on. Next is Contingency Screen. It requires you have 3 in science, and also the Gas Energy Deflection Apparatus, which is a kind of shield that lets you get through the Xyranium sections and also applies temporary health to your character. When your health hits 25%, you'll activate this automatically without spending energy, and it has a 30-second cooldown, so this is really just like an oh shit activation, you're about to die, and you get some temporary health. Then we have Weak Point Scanner. It requires the N-Ray Scanner gadget and 6 in science. Weak spots are highlighted and damage dealt to them is increased when using the N-Ray Scanner, so if you pick this up, you probably want to use that scanner during combat over your other gadgets, so some of these don't work well together. You pick one or the other if they have a gadget focus. Then we have Cold-Blooded, which requires 9 in science. You can now apply Chilled faster when dealing frost damage, and enemies killed while frozen will shatter, dealing frost damage to hostiles in the area. So if you do want to go a frost damage focus, pick this up, though then you probably don't want Electrotherapist. I can use both, but I usually like to have a focus. Then we have Targeting Scanner. Focusing on the target with the N-Ray scanner will mark them. Marking targets prioritizes them for your companions and causes the party's attack against them to regenerate your energy. So it requires 5 in science and the N-Ray scanner, so you might want to pick both of these up if you are leaning into the N-Ray scanner kind of playstyle. And this also works really well with leadership. As we've seen the leadership perks, it really focuses on you wanting your companions to attack your targets. And there are also gear pieces that let you mark targets that make your companions attack them as a priority. So this is quite useful. Then we have Xyranium Powered and requires a medical perk, Xyranium Absorption, and 5 in science. Your energy recharges faster based on the amount of Xyranium poisoning you have accumulated, up to 10 energy per 1 as Xyranium poisoning increases, and unless you have a way to increase your Xyranium poisoning levels, I definitely like the Xyranium Absorption perk. Don't really recommend getting this because Xyranium isn't that common in the game as you might think, considering there is a perk for it. Then we have Sprayer Prayer. It requires Anti-Acidic Dematerializer and 6 in science, and this gadget is really there to melt bodies down when you're sneaking around and don't want a body to be detected. Though this makes it so it can be charged, allowing its projectile to travel further and deal more damage, so you can use this as a weapon. Charging the gadget costs more energy, and this does do a significant amount of damage. So if you want to use the Dematerializer and want to go an energy focused build, this can be quite effective as a payoff for that. Then we have the N Radiator for 20 in science. So this is the pinnacle perk for science. Once every few seconds when you deal damage, you will deal the damage again as N-Ray. Now keep in mind, N-Ray doesn't affect auto mechanicals. So you deal 100% additional damage done as N-Ray, essentially doubling your damage to both creatures and human enemies, and it does have a 3-second cooldown to make it not completely overpowered. So yes, this is very good. I don't need to explain to you that this is very good. Sneak is next, and it makes it so you deal 35% more sneak damage and lower the NPC detection rate by 2% each level. 700% more sneak damage at level 20 is huge. Really though, sneaking around is not hard even without investment. Enemies aren't incredibly aware. You don't even need to invest into it to steal things, as most NPCs don't care. However, without investment, sneak attacks will do no bonus damage unless you have a one-handed melee weapon. 700% bonus damage is insane and will often one-shot any target besides the bossiest of bosses. You can use smoke grenades to get back into stealth, as well as some gear and even a floor that gives you a low chance to enter stealth. In the world, it comes up as little as guns and melee, but its perks are strong, especially when combined with guns or melee. First we have Assassin for 1 point into sneak. After scoring a kill from stealth, your movement speed is dramatically increased for a short time by 100%. That is dramatic. You will feel very quick. So if you want to chain together assassinations or you want to get away before you're discovered, this is very useful. Then we have Ghost for 2 in sneak. If you're crouched when an NPC starts investigating you, gain camouflage for a short duration. It has a cooldown of 3 minutes, which is decreased based on your sneak skill. So you get this up to 20, and this will be a significantly shorter cooldown. Now, camouflage makes you invisible. So they will start investigating you, but they won't be able to see you. This is very useful if you want to stay hidden and not aggro the whole area. Then we have Silent Steps for 6 in sneak. After leaving stealth, your footsteps are silent for 8 seconds, and I don't need to explain to you once again how that can be good for a stealth build. Then we have Stalker for 5 in sneak, and with the perk Assassin, you gain 200% increased sneak attack damage against hostiles that are investigating you, a distraction device which is like a grenade you can throw out which gets enemies to go and face it, or a corpse you've left behind. So this might actually make it so you have a build where you intentionally want to leave behind things for enemies to see, so you can get that extra 200% sneak attack damage, which is quite significant. Then we have Light Step for 10 in sneak. It makes it so walking over traps and mines will never set them off. Now, traps and mines are quite common, but it might feel like a waste investing a perk point into this, considering there are so many perks in the game that are quite significant. Then we have, like we already mentioned in the gun portion, Suppressionist. It makes it so pistols gain that sneak attack damage and are quieter, and any gun with a silencer makes no noise whatsoever. So if you plan on using guns at all, get it up to 8, get sneak up to 8, and you won't really look back. Then we have, like we mentioned in melee, Vital Striker. If you've got 15 in melee and 15 in sneak, this is extremely good. Don't even need to go through it again. Just pick this up. It makes it so even outside of sneaking, you're extremely potent. This is probably the most powerful perk in the game, if I had to call it, just because it makes it so combat is almost trivialized if you've invested heavily into sneak attack damage. However, you do need to invest heavily into it. And then because you've invested into melee and sneak, there's not a lot you can do in the open world. You can't unlock a lot of things, you can't get into special areas, and so on and so forth. Speech is next and is core if you plan on talking yourself out of problems. It comes up very, very often, as this is an RPG after all. The funny thing is, if you invest into this, you're still quite potent in combat against humans, the other third of the enemy types. If you have hack, medical, and speech, you'll be hitting all 3 enemy types harder. 5% human damage per level up to 100% at level 20. The perks will make you even better against them. If you're investing into speech, you absolutely want to pick up Space Ranger. It makes it so speech scales your damage. You get 2.5% damage per speech skill. That means 50% more damage from all sources at max speech, which is very, very powerful, considering there might be times you want to engage in combat and talking your way out of it won't really help. So it'll make it so you won't really need to pick up a skill that focuses on combat, because Space Ranger makes it so you won't fall behind. Then we have Palm Greaser. Bribes cost less and stolen items sell for more. If you plan on stealing absolutely everything you see, which you should do because there's almost no consequences for it, this can pay off quite significantly, though I don't see cash as too much of a problem in this game. Only pick this up if there's absolutely nothing better to get. Then we have Intimidator for 5 into speech. Dealing damage to weak humans or creatures frightens them for a short duration and has a cooldown between activations which shortens with your speech skill. Strong enemies such as leaders and bosses until their health has been significantly reduced, but they still can get frightened, so this still pays off. If you're going into speech, pick this up because it's a flavor win if nothing else, and humans are quite common in the game. Then we have Wholesale Spender for 4 into speech. Buying or selling items with a vendor accrues goodwill. After accruing enough, you gain a permanent discount and sell bonus with that vendor. I've found this to be almost completely useless because, once again, money is not too much of an issue and you don't really want to buy a lot of items at a single vendor. You usually go from vendor to vendor, seeing what really unique items they have and if it works for your build. So you're not going to go back to a vendor just to, say, buy ammo a lot, because once again, you're not really going a combat build, and you can also craft ammo. So really, I can see what they intended with this, but it's not a great perk. Then we have Charlatan. It makes it so many of your lies are more believable and will be more likely to be accepted as true. Additionally, the likelihood that enemies will target you is reduced, but you really want it for that first part because this does come up quite a lot. And if you've gone 6 into speech, you might as well get that a little bit better at convincing your enemies. Then we have Grim Visage or Visage. Scoring a kill will temporarily cause human and creature enemies near the target to be frightened for a short duration. Once again, strong enemies won't be frightened until their health is reduced. It does require Intimidator, but it does upgrade it. And I've seen this come up in conversations a few times, so it is quite useful to pick up if you've picked up Intimidator and you've got 9 in speech. Then we have Tall Tale Teller. You need to pick up Charlatan and you also need 10 in speech, but it makes it so only your most outlandish lies aren't believed, with you being able to lie about even more things. Additionally, you gain a bonus to damage when attacking enemies that aren't targeting you directly, so they can be targeting your companions, and a lot of companions can taunt. So if you pick this up, pick up companions that do taunt and you'll get 20% bonus damage to almost everything. Combine that with Space Ranger and you'll be doing 70% bonus damage to everything, which is no small amount considering you've gone investing into a charming, charismatic build. Like I mentioned in the leadership section, with 9 in leadership and 9 in speech, you get the Negotiator. If you're going a leadership and speech build, You absolutely, without question, should pick this up because it just boosts your reputation with all factions up to almost the max, and it does give you less companion recharge time, and it's just very, very useful. You should absolutely pick this up, especially if you're playing as Obi-Wan. So those are the skills and perks. So far, you've edited your character's looks, picked their background, picked your traits and skills. Next is naming your character and reviewing. But that's not the end of your customization. You see, you'll pick a perk every second level up, and this will be based on its prerequisites like we've gone through. So you'll have around 15 perks at max level, give or take a few bonus ones you'll pick up along the way. Most importantly, as you play the game, you'll be offered flaws. For example, I was offered consumerism early as I was buying a lot of things. It makes it so vendor prices are 15% less, but I sell things for 10% less than I would. I saw this as an upside, so I grabbed it. It then made it so I could select the dumb options in conversation as well, which seemed like a further upgrade. Not all flaws are so simple. Many will fundamentally change how you play. Foot in mouth makes it so you get 15% more experience forever, but you'll also need to select a response in conversation fast, or the response will be chosen for you. Flaws can really mix up how you play and are entirely optional. However, you can choose the flawed flaw. It makes it so you get an extra perk point every 5 levels retroactively, but have to accept all flaws offered to you moving forward, making you one big bag of flaws. This might not be so bad, but it will offer a very unique playstyle. Never look up into the sun, for example, to avoid getting that one. I do not recommend picking flawed on your first playthrough, just like the game suggests. During the first half of the game, I was offered a staggering 15 flaws. I accepted half of them because why the heck not? I wanted to see how they would pay off, and I didn't really feel hindered. And now, that's everything you need to know about your characters, background, traits, skills, perks, and flaws. My recommendation is picking 2 traits with a negative one, then choosing 2 or 3 skills you really want to invest into and sticking to those. Spreading skill points out is only good when you know the skill check ranges. I also recommend picking up a flaw or 2 if it doesn't seem so detrimental to your build. So hopefully this video was helpful. I'm keen to hear what you're playing on your first run. Let me know below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, ciao friends.